Welcome to ZenLeader, where we empower women to tap into their confidence, discover their voice, and find calm in the chaos. Join your host, Dr. Jodi Blinco, founder of ZenLeader, motivational speaker, self-help coach, and author of Inner Alchemy, as we have unfiltered and unscripted conversations with inspiring women from around the globe. Here's your host, Dr. Jodi Blinco.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the ZenLeader Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jodi Blinco. I am so excited today for our guest. You are going to be just as excited after we get done with today's conversation, too. I have no doubt. I'm going to let him talk all the details. And if you hear, I said I know this is a women's ZenLeader is all about inspiring women to tap into their voice, discover their confidence, and all while staying calm in the chaos and climbing the ladder. But we have an extra special treat and perspective for you today. Shohan Rahman, he is here with us to talk about all things culture and advocating for women's development. And welcome. On that note, welcome, Shohan. Tell us more about. Just give us the background and a little bit of context of your history, and then I want to have us dive into all the details.
Thank you, Jodi, for having me. I'm super excited as well. Just so everyone knows, I'm a girl dad, so obviously because of that, I'm always thinking of what we could do to continuously invest and help the women in the sales force, in leadership, etc. But my background, I'm originally from Houston, Texas, started my career in higher education sales, did that in Houston and moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where I got a chance to meet you, also work with you, then did that and moved to Jersey City, New Jersey. We both went to the Northeast. You were in Boston, so we continued with the University of Phoenix, which was fantastic. After that, I kind of went into traditional field outside sales with Living Social as an individual contributor for 4+ years, and then moved into Paychex and human capital management, moved into leadership again. And from there on, I went from Paychex to Daily Pay, where I went to a startup and helped build the sales organization as like an early stage startup. Did that for 3 years before coming to Square, and have had multiple roles at Square so far, just helping building different parts of the business. Initially with Afterpay SMB during the acquisition, then with some channel sales, enterprise sales, and some other cool things like sales ramp in enablement and incubator sales, which is focused on just go-to-market projects and initiatives. So currently doing that. And the last thing I'll just plug is I've recently launched ShoForward, just thinking about giving back and helping just individuals with micro learnings and just content that I can share based on my experience and learnings and books and etc.
So let's hang out there for just a second. Thank you for the history and just the evolution of what you do. And also sharing with us that you're a girl dad. I think that's a very important part of this conversation. But can you explain ShoForward for us a little bit? So I think people probably heard it, but we might not know what it means. And I think that is a really critical, important, relevant part of our conversation today.
Absolutely. And just to really be clear, it's just branding. I think everyone should build their brand. And I'm not doing anything where, hey, I have now this new business and I'm trying to sell stuff. Nothing like that. It's more of just branding, which I do internally at Square. I've done it internally in various organizations with my culture and different things that I focus on and push. And then my thought was, how do I really push that externally outside of just work and create a brand that can actually give back, have a go-giver mentality, created a newsletter called Pay It Forward, and then being able to go out and do podcasts like this, speaking engagements at other places, and just sharing with the world various things from culture to sales process to leadership coaching, various mentality, like the Mamba mentality stuff that I love, and all the various books I'm reading on a day-to-day basis. So it's really just my way of branding and sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing that knowledge, sharing that experience. Okay. So talk to me about, I mentioned this very earlier on in the introduction about ZenLeader is about developing women leaders. You are a male, and so that's a different perspective, but we are excited to have your perspective in the conversation. And that's really where I want to start is, why is this even important to you? What is it about advocating for women's development in the workplace and women's leadership development? Why is that even a thing? Why is that on your radar?
I think it's a combination of things. One, I'll share myself, just even being a minority, it's the same kind of concept, right? Like advocating for minorities and inclusion and equity. And I think the women aspect is just same as that regardless. But
Yeah.
also just having strong women leaders early in my career. And I'll, give you as one of those examples, to hiring women. When I was in Afterpay, all my senior leaders were fantastic women. And I absorbed all those leaders. And just hiring places like when I was daily pay and creating a sales team, and we had, no female sales professionals in the enterprise world. It was just for some whatever reason not happening there and maybe frowned upon. And it's like, well, we need to change that because that's not how it should be. And then I also share a lot with about my wife, who when I met was like a top salesperson that just craved development, and I invested in her. And then obviously when I left that company, her and I started a relationship. But it's just one of those things that also helped me think about, how do you help develop all these individuals? And now with 3 daughters, I want them to be able to go in the workplace and just have like organic success, not having to focus so much on investing only in women. It should
Yeah.
be automatic.
Yeah. And what are some of the challenges that you've observed? You shared your experience and what you've observed with your wife when she was a top performing sales person but craving development, and the same thing that you want for your daughters. What are some of the challenges that you have observed women leaders facing in the workplace, and how have you worked to provide development opportunities to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, one of the most common challenges is that it's still dominated by male leaders. I pay attention to that when I look at organizations, whether it's somebody I want to work for, or even just when I'm in an organization and they have various divisions, looking at which ones are male dominated, which ones not. And the great thing is some organizations really like focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as just the gender specific topic. But and I think the challenge is when you have male dominated organizations, you don't get people to, think about it, because they're much less likely to want to advance, right? They don't see it. They don't see a group of senior women leaders, so they don't think they should be even pursuing those things. So that's kind of the big change I want. Like, I want my oldest daughter to be able to go into the workforce and not have to think about that. There's ways to go around it, but it should be just much more common. She should be able to go into a job and go, wow, what, successful leaders, regardless of the gender, and it's not male dominated, it's equal or more. And I think like if she went to a small business right now, she likes to do a lot of social media and things like that, and was working as a social media manager for a small business, it probably hasn't trickled down to those business leaders unless the
Yeah.
entrepreneur themselves was women. It might be much more corporate because we have resources, we have intentionality there. But I bet mid-market small businesses, it's still very male dominated unless you had a women business leader.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 questions. One related to just overall development of people, and going back to the comment that you made about inclusion. And then one about culture and cultural shifts for putting the development of women leadership on the map. So we'll go with the development question first. When you, and I know you have always been passionate and really plugged into developing your people. It is in the fabric of who you are. It's what you believe, it's what you do. Um, do you think the skill development is significantly different, whether we're talking about developing skills for a woman to be successful in the workplace, or is it really just the development of the whole human being based off where their challenges and opportunities for growth are?
I think it's more of the second, which is, do we truly have a culture of development and learning? Like everybody says that. And it's funny
Yeah.
because I always bring this up. When people interview at jobs, they always say, well, tell me about what development programs you are and what you'll invest in me and et cetera. Then you fast forward and that employee's working, a year later, and there's 2 parts to it. One, does that person still focus on development and learning, or was it just a question they asked during the interview? And then two, does that leadership team or that company and training enablement actually have true development opportunities? Or was it all just, again, yeah, we do training, onboarding, we get there, and then we are all about the numbers and all about the actual job to do and forget about actually allocating time for investment in people. So I do think there's a huge gap in when we say culture of actual learning and development. And then along with that, I do think there are people that might not go and do that development. Like, one of the things I like to do is find top talent that you want to invest in and you want to help them grow. And it might not be a formal program at the company, but it's like, hey, here's a book I would love for you to read. I mean, that's what I did with Jamie, FYI, my wife eventually.
Yeah.
Right. She was a top rep, but didn't get that, like, she was craving it, but wasn't getting it from anybody there. Like, hey, let's invest in you. Let's grow you. Let's make you better. Let's promote you. So giving her even the book, Strengths Finder. And there was another book, like The Next 5 Years, which is about her goals. Like, just talking to her about that, because she was the top rep and I wanted to invest in the top person. And it's like, let's give you some books for you to read and develop. And by doing that, now you have somebody that's growing, that can be promoted. She didn't go into leadership there, but eventually when she went into her other roles, she continuously advanced her career into field sales, channel sales, all these different things, because she was like craving that and wanting to go more, but nobody was talking to her about it. So I think partly it's even people doing it. And what happens, I think, is if you're not naturally doing that or looking at your overall team, you're usually doing it to people that are the most like you, right? Like, a male is going to go invest in a male because that's what they're mostly comfortable, right? It's their bro. It's the person they know. They could go play golf on the weekends. They're talking about football and fantasy and things like that, versus, hey, let me go invest in a group of women that could potentially be the next rock stars of our company or the next group of senior leaders, but I'm not familiar with how they are, the commonality. And I think that's a big gap of it. So culture of learning and development, along with that. And I don't know what the proper term is, but if somebody's not just like you, it's harder to hire them, grow them, develop them. I mean, they say that all the time, right? People hire people that they are most comfortable with because it's like them. But I'm not trying to have 12 Shohans that report to me. I want all the various different people that have the competencies that could be amazing. And it shouldn't matter if it's male or female.
That'd be an intense 12-person team.
I learned that early in my career.
So if there is, well, let's just keep it simple. Let's say someone is listening to this that has a team, right? Male or female, they have a team of people. What would be, going back to what you just said, I think that's a learned leadership skill where you don't necessarily just gravitate to what's comfortable or people who are comfortable. What would be your one or two pieces of insight or recommendations on how do you do what you just said, where you're assessing talent and then you're identifying where they have opportunities to develop? I know it sounds simple, but and conceptually it's simple, but in reality, I think you just gave several examples of where that can be a challenge. So if someone's listening to this, where do they start with that leadership skill, male or female? Doesn't matter, of how do you assess talent and develop? Where would they start to really start to hone that?
Yeah. I think one is competencies. Like, you have to have like a competency bank and understand what is it that you're looking for in that role. And it's okay that if it's not the same competencies as you as well, right? Like, that's one of those vulnerability aspects that you have to have. But like, if you focus on competencies, it really shouldn't matter like who that person is, because they have those things that you're looking for. Are they driven? Are they very good with time management, detail oriented? Again, depending on the role, if they're a leader, are they ambitious? Do they have a learning mindset? Do they demonstrate accountability? Are they, focused on their peers and leveling people up? Like, these competencies are what you're looking for. And then you'll naturally, organically have like the best people. But I think when you don't have that culture of diversity yet, you have to show intentionality. So, again, when I was at Daily Pay, we didn't have any enterprise sales reps that were women. So my next hire was going to be a woman. And it didn't matter that, people are like, well, you can't just do that. Like, no, you can have intentionality, because you know what? We need to change the way our team looks, because a lot of times they're going to be speaking to women, and we can't just have male dominated room going into an enterprise sales meeting and it's talking to a lot of CHROs or CPOs or CFOs that are women. And now we don't look like we actually have a team that's diverse and can talk to those individuals. Like, that kind of intentionality is important. I was on a call not too long ago, and I saw I watched the call recordings, and I saw everybody that came into the team selling mentality. You bring your executives, you bring the people. And I was shocked that we're going into a business that's owned by a woman, and we had very little women on the call, one actually, while we had all these males in the room. And it's like, not that we shouldn't have them. Why couldn't we have more representation? That would have changed that call. So intentionality is important. So yes, look at competencies so you can really understand that person's job ability versus just relating to you kind of mindset. And then you have some intentionality in hiring. When I took over here, even at Square, we have an awesome DEI team that basically puts together even your own data analytics. Like, hey, how much of your team is men versus women? How much is minorities? How much is it, etc. And it's great. But I was like, I need to have a very good balance, and I had that intentionality when bringing in specific people to work within the organization. So we had a balanced out team. Intentionality happened because of that.
Yeah. Intentionality. I love that. I think the competency piece is really important, because unless that exists in the structure of the roles or your organization as a leader, if you don't create that for yourself or for the roles of your team, it does make development more challenging and that intentionality more challenging. And so interesting, we're kind of getting into a human development conversation, but in its essence, that's what this is all about. Just so happens that for ZenLeader, we happen to be talking about women's development, but in reality, it ultimately is human development.
And personally, one day I'd love it where it's organic. Like, you don't need to do all these resources, and that it's normal. Yeah. And then now my girls going into the workforce, it's not, hey, you need to go network with Jodi, go to the ZenLeader podcast, find somebody at the company that you can get mentorship from. It's just normal, and they can do their job and get promoted to becoming a leader regardless, because it's the norm. It's like, it wasn't male dominated. It's just organic. And that's what hopefully one day it will be.
Yeah. I want to, I've got 3 questions swimming around in my head. I want to go back over to the cultural shift part of this discussion, because you just mentioned, maybe one day it will be organic and it's just part of how we operate. What cultural shifts have you experienced in your careers that have to happen in order for women's leadership development or women's development or just development in general to be on the radar? What has to happen for that to not just be something that we say we do or have it be in the job description or in the mission? How do you actually live that? How does that become part of the culture?
And I think it ties back to the intentionality, but you have to have people that are advocates intentionally helping those, that company. Maybe it's a mission or vision or etc. Well, are we actually participating in the employee resources groups? Are we promoting that? Are we talking about it? I love it where, at Square, we do have a women's group, and the chair is, one of my peers, and she wanted me to, give some people that could come in and speak to that group. This is intentional. This is utilizing the resources. This is helping each other. And then the resource group is going back and doubling down on how can we help all the people that are part of this group. So that had to happen as a part of this org. And I would think every organization should have something like that. I loved seeing in sales so many groups internally and externally on women in sales. Whether it's external companies that I've seen that created women in sales or women in tech sales, I see that a lot. I also see it in companies where they will have a women's conference or a women's group. When we had national conferences at Paychex, and there was a women's group there of leaders, and when we went at the national conference, then they would break out and have their own sessions to be intentional and help those individuals keep growing and become much more of that leadership focus. And then when they're helping the leaders, it trickles down. to all the other employees. So I think it's that intentionality of organizations doing it, not only just people like myself or individuals that really advocate for it, but organizations need to be intentional with their resource groups, with their networking, with these network groups that are external, and people need to, utilize that in order to really help spread it.
Yep. You mentioned earlier about brand, and everyone should have, be conscious of or intentional about developing their own brand, really the who they are, who they want to be, what is their purpose. You could even align it with that. Part of what we talk about with ZenLeader specifically, and also from a female perspective, is tapping into their authentic voice and discovering and tapping into that confidence. And so I can share, from where I sat when I was really, getting into the professional environment, trying to find my own way, believing that your voice mattered and that it was okay to speak up or share, or not be fearful of, is this the wrong thing to say? Am I going to, what is that going to mean if I say the wrong things in this conversation or this meeting? What will that mean? Right. That big question around the voice. And I'm going somewhere here, I promise, with a question. That, the flip side of that is just your confidence, and how that all kind of has an impact on one another. It's like it all lives in the same ecosystem, right? Because if you're not feeling like you have the skills or you feel confident, you're probably not going to use your voice a whole lot. So it all feeds off of each other. So developing skills, what is your take or your experience with when someone taps in and develops those skills that they either need for their job or for growth? What is the impact on confidence level and their willingness to speak up and use their voice?
Well, I think it's a huge impact. I think that's what it does. Like, Jamie, again, using her an example, when focusing on Strengths Finder and giving her some books to think about her goals and vision, gave her that confidence to actually eventually leave University of Phoenix for a much more challenging outside sales role, right? We both have been at higher education sales. It's one way of doing it. Well, it helped her get out of her comfort zone in order to go and be an outside field sales rep, and then eventually move into a larger company with a much more bigger scope. But like, those kinds of things probably wouldn't have happened if someone wasn't going and saying, hey, let's invest in you. Hey, you're doing this really well, and building that authentic voice and tapping into all those competencies that she had. I think also when it's about authenticity, like, it's the leaders that are also vulnerable and showcasing and demonstrating that, whether you're male or female. I mean, just look behind me. I'm being who I am, right? It's not a corporate background or etc. And there's a lot of times it's like, man, be you. And if you are, authentic, you are vulnerable, and then you're generous and you're doing your job well, it'll all fall into place. But I think there's a lot of people that are scared of that because leaders themselves don't show that vulnerability or authentic, right? How many leaders like to say work-life balance versus work-life integration, right? Because they don't want you to talk about your personal life in your work, right? How my calendar shows my personal, when I have to go pick up my kids from school, when I have date night, it shows it up there, etc. But the point is, I'm being open, vulnerable, transparent. And what happens then is it trickles down and allows others to see that, be like that. And now we're creating a culture of transparency, a culture of vulnerability, a culture of diversity, and all these things then start happening. So I think it's not just one thing, but also it's doing it consistently, right? You're not going to see me show up with a background like this one time and then never again because whether it's I'm afraid or somebody told me something, it's who I am, and I'm consistently demonstrating that. And when you have consistency in all these things, then you truly have a culture of like that trust, and people can feel they can be themselves and grow.
I love your piece about, being you, being authentically you. And it sounds easy and simple, but I think it's also really challenging. That's a growth and journey all in its own. And I think we all evolve. But like, and I know this is a way bigger philosophical question, but if someone's listening to this, like, okay, that sounds good, but I can't be me at work, or I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable. Or I remember in my first management role, the leader at the time, she said to me, we were at like an offsite event, and I was showing up completely different to her than how I would show up in the office. And she said, where is this person in the office? Like, where is this fun, loud, semi-obnoxious sometimes person in the office? And I said, well, I can't be that person. I'm a leader. So I have to show up, my interpretation was I have to be two different people, because in my leadership role, I have to fit in this box, as I call it, and do all the quote unquote right things. And, but that integration of who I wasn't comfortable integrating that. But where the magic happened was once I started to do that, it was an entirely different leadership experience for me, for my people. And it was fun. Like, work and leadership became fun because I started to understand what it was really about. And it wasn't about showing up perfect, define whatever perfect means, right? Perfect all the time, or not making mistakes. And you talk about vulnerability. And so I think being authentic is something that it's like the holy grail, or if you will, or it's like the place to work too, to just feel comfortable, right? You can show up
Right.
with your beautiful wall of tennis shoes behind you, and it becomes, a conversation piece, and people are curious because they have this sense of, he's not pretending to be somebody he's not. He's showing up as who he is, which, as we all know, anytime that happens, there's trust that's being built right away, because people don't have to sift through, what are you not showing me? What are you showing me? What's real? What's not real? Which, by the way, I was having a conversation, this is probably a couple months ago, but this quote has stuck with me, and I share it in some of these conversations because I think it's so true. It's a professor at a school in San Diego, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but she said, human beings are exquisite detectors of bullshit, whether we know it or not. But it's so true if you think about it. Human beings are always running in the background. What's real? What's not real? Can I trust you? Should I be guarded? How far can I go here? And I think it's such an important piece of a leadership conversation and a development conversation, because if you're hitting a block with somebody, or a guard, or they're not sure if they can trust you or not, I don't know how much you're really going to be able to develop that individual, or, you're going to hit a wall at some point. So, where did you get to that point of just being you and being comfortable with that? And what are the recommendations for someone that's listening to this saying, yeah, I would love to do that, but I can't? Or is there a recommendation? I know it's a really big philosophical question, and I don't know that I prepared you for that one. So if you're like, yep, I'll pass, it's okay.
I think after the pandemic changed a lot also with remote world, it's almost like you have to be with virtual conversations and being on a screen versus being in person. So I think there was a huge transition for everyone during this time. Like, you can put up a Zoom background that you don't want anybody to see where you're at versus you can show it. And, again, being you is being the ability to also use a Zoom background if that's what you want, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not telling somebody that you can't do those things.
Yeah.
But I think, for me throughout my career is just various learnings, various people that have helped me understand those different things, or just seeing it as an example. And I think that's what a lot of this is about. Like, if you don't see it in your workplace, you don't see leaders, you don't see female leaders, you don't see people being authentic, you don't see people being vulnerable, like, that's what happens is you don't have it. So it really comes back to, I think, the leadership aspect. So my recommendation is, I'm big on this, is like, I go and work for people that I want to work for, because I feel those people have similar mindsets. And then when I'm working for those people, I can be who I am and don't have to be like a professional Shohan that has to dress up or etc. or whatever it is, like having a background like this or saying some of the things I have. I think there's always a balance still. Like, I'm not saying get on a call and like, you're cursing and this and that. Like, you still have to be professional, but you can be authentic while doing your job. So I think the recommendation is obviously, one, for people to go work where they feel they can be like that. And I know that's also tough, right? You might have a job. It's not that scenario. You have a good job. You want to be there. Then I get it. But, I'm big on, I go and work where I want to work because it's like the values that organization and the leaders have, as well as a leader. And my recommendation is for all leaders to demonstrate these things. Because again, if people don't see it, they don't see someone saying, hey guys, I'm going to start the meeting at 9 because I have to drop off my kids to school and then I'll come in there. And then they hear someone saying it, then they're not lying and scared of like, I got to go take care of my kids real quick. Like, absolutely do that. I understand that. You know what? Let me move my one-on-one with you to later in the day so you can make sure your kid's okay. Or if your kid is sick that day, take care of that. I work around it if you need to, but I'm not going to say, hey, you can't go do that, etc. I completely understand it. I'm going to go do that when I have that situation. So I think the recommendation is for leaders to demonstrate the things that they want from their people when it comes to this. If you want a culture diversity, you want a culture development, you want a culture where everybody looks different, bring something different to the table. That's important, but leaders have to start with that.
Yeah, it's the old sorry, I feel like my internet connection's going in and out a little bit. It's the old, saying you lead by example. And that sounds cliche, but it's so true, because if you're not living, breathing, showing up that way in the day-to-day, that's where you get words that end up in mission statements and on strategic plans and in documents that don't really mean anything because nobody's bringing it to life. Yeah.
Agree. And listen, it's even in a large organization like I'm at, there's still a lot of work to do. We might say a lot of these things, I might be demonstrating it, but what I hope to do is keep spreading it in order to help everyone feeling like this and thinking like this. And one day you have like so much of this organically versus the intentionality, but it's about being consistent, having some intention, and actually leading by example.
Yeah. You've used that word intentionality quite a bit throughout our conversation. So you talked about intentionality, values, competencies, vulnerability, transparency, and all words that people understand and they get. But again, if you don't bring them to life and live it yourself,
right,
it doesn't come full circle. So two last questions for you. One, you really kind of have already alluded to this, but when you see 2, 3, 5 years down the road for the future of women's development, what would that look like? What should it look like?
Yeah, I think, again, I would love it to be very organic, but I think it's still going to take time to get there. So when the time's not there yet to just be organic like that, I think the development is the things that you're doing, right? Spreading this. Even like, imagine you mentioned that, you usually have female guests and I'm doing that, but like, what if we were able to get more male leaders thinking like this and doing these things? And some of them might, but they just don't have the forum and don't see it. So I think it's just, again, spreading as much as you can is one aspect of it. I think the resources like ERGs, as well as networking, mentorship programs. Like, I love when I see, all the different mentorship programs, or even unofficial mentorship, right? When I share like with different people on my team, like, hey, you know what? I'd love for you to meet with Jodi Ashbrook or Blinco now, or meet with, I have sometimes them meeting Carissa Buckley intentionally. Like, hey, I want you to talk to Carissa Buckley. She's an enterprise rep now at Daily Pay. And I think you have a lot of great things that can help you build and develop. But I want you to meet someone that's doing it and learn from her a little bit. But like, I'm creating those types of relationship and networking. And I think the future is that we need more of that, where people are linking individuals so they could grow, whether it's a leader or someone in another role or for their growth and development. But more of that should be happening. And then again, like I said, the different resources, whether it's a conference or I see a lot of LinkedIn groups that are women in sales or women in leadership, like we need more and more of that. So that way it really is just spreading it out there. So that way it becomes the automatic obvious. And now when my daughter Des is looking at roles and hears that that company has all these things, she's excited to be there and grow her career. Or when Milani gets to the age that she's looking for a job and she wants to go into law, like I want it to be where she's not fighting an uphill battle to be an amazing lawyer, and it's just automatic in the industry, and she can go and do that because of great people that have paved the way.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
I don't know what Zoe wants to be yet. So she's the little one, but hers is like maybe more, 15 to 20 years down the road. But the next two, I'm excited for them to go into that. But I'm hoping I can also educate and teach them, and they can watch this podcast and be like, yeah, I need to think like what my dad's saying and go find those types of opportunities.
Yeah. They're so lucky to have you and Jamie, obviously, just supporting them in that way. And I think there's so much power there that you obviously know it in the day to day, but we grow up, we get older, and we look back on our experiences and are able to say, wow, that made a difference and that made an impact. And that helped me to think or see or have a different perspective on where I wanted to go.
Exactly.
Okay. So you have to tell us about the shoes.
Yeah, the story is growing up, and you just mentioned about our experiences and stuff. My parents wouldn't buy me Jordans. They would, be like, nope, those are too expensive. So I would have like, the next group of shoes, Fila's, Converse, maybe like some Reebok pumps, things like that. And I was like, all right, well then when I grow up and I work hard, I could buy any pair of Jordans I want. And these are all Jordans. They're my top 24 Jordans because, I rotate them as I get more.
I love it.
Now I instill that within my kids that no, you're not going to get Jordans for school. Your shoe sizes grow too fast. Instead, you're going to work hard. And when you get an opportunity to do like this, you can do that too, like I did. And that's kind of the story. And the other thing is pandemic, it was like less places to wear it since I'm working remote or we're all at our home. So I just put them up, and my wife was happy that she got more closet space.
There you go. So logistical question. What happens like if you want to wear the red and white pair and the corner, you got to trade them out? Or what if it's not in the top 24? It's just an empty block that day?
I'll wear whichever one. I'm going to a conference tonight. I fly out for tomorrow for a conference. So I've already picked out the pair I want. It's sitting in my luggage. So I'll just come back. What happens is when I get a new pair, then one of these is going to go upstairs into the closet in my just rotation. But as far as when I wear it, it's whichever one. I don't just post them up there. I'll just wear them when I feel like wearing them.
Love it. Okay. So last question for you, for sure. And if you've already shared this throughout our conversation, just say, yep, it would be this. What are your words of wisdom? And that can be anything. Words of wisdom that you would want people listening this to hear, to pass along, to know, to give thought to.
Yeah, I feel like I have a bunch of those depending on the topic. Yeah. But if I was to, give anybody opportunity, regardless, it's just continuous development, right? Think about Kaizen. I know you and I actually have done Kaizen exercises before, and it's the same concept. Kobe Bryant says with Mamba mentality, and I have my Kobe wall here and all the Mamba stuff. And it's just like, are you better today than you were yesterday? What are you doing every day to get better? And why not? And then I think, tying to my ShoForward and Pay It Forward newsletter is share that with others. Give them that development that you're doing and help each other. And I think in this type of setting that you're doing with ZenLeader, it's if we focus on that continuous development and we can help all of us, then we will see that future that we want.
Absolutely. And that's part of your purpose and role as just a human, is to offer. We all have experiences and we learn. That's part of the journey. And if you're not sharing that and paying that forward, people can always learn from each other. And that's what we're here to do. Yeah. Shohan, thank you so much for your time, for giving us so much inspiration from your perspective, the shoes, can you be better today than you were yesterday? Can you just be working towards it? And I think there's so much in this conversation in the last, 40 minutes or so that any human being can take and think about their own personal journey of development in the workplace, outside of the workplace, but also those folks that are in leadership roles. What are you doing to be intentional? How are you showing up? How are you bringing that into your culture? Are you intentionally developing your culture, or is it just a place that you all show up to and hope for the best,
Yeah.
every day? So
Well, thank you so
you.
much for having me. It's a pleasure for sure.
Yes. All right. Well, for those of you who are listening, thank you for hanging in with us. And I trust and I hope that this conversation served you. I have no doubt it probably did in all sorts of ways. So hang on to listen to our outro for the ZenLeader Masterclass. If you're looking for ways where you can bring more calm into the chaos, where you can really tap into your confidence, discover your voice, it's all there in the masterclass. We will see you all again soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to begin your personal ZenLeader journey, head over to ZenLeader.org and sign up for our ZenLeader Masterclass course, Climbing the Ladder and Staying Calm in the Chaos. ZenLeader also offers customizable group coaching programs and workshops to fit organizations and industries of any size. Whether you're looking to tap into your confidence, discover your voice, or find tranquility amidst the chaos, ZenLeader is here to support you every step of the way.